All right. So, um, what we want to do today is learning outcome 4, planning effective HR strategies, and we'll start by talking about the impact of organizational strategy, structure, and culture on managing HR. So, in terms of organizational structure, the one of the most important things for us is organizational design. How do we design the job roles in the organization and how they relate to each other? So, kind of like the hierarchy in the organization, the organizational structure organogram, right?
Right.
And this obviously will also impact on the culture. They are related to each other. So, for instance, when you have a very hierarchical organization, it tends to have a more bureaucratic style of culture. If you have a more nimble, flatter, agile structure, you tend to have a culture that is more innovative, for instance, and flexible. So, this is one popular model that looks at organizational design. So, this is the impact of structure on HR, and basically we say that they are related to each other, and these are the things that influence it. So, your organizational environment, right, or organizational culture will influence your structure being the one in the middle. Your strategy, your organizational strategy will influence your structure, right? Your structure is there to implement your strategy, to make your strategy come to life. So, for instance, if your strategy is to expand internationally, then we expect that your structure will now have branches in international locations, and it may be structured, maybe, for instance, European division, South American division, African division, Middle East division, and so on. So that's, there's a relationship there between strategy and structure. The technology you use in the organization will also influence structure. So, for instance, if you are highly automated, or you use robots, or you use artificial intelligence, it's going to affect the structure, whether you employ a large number of employees, pure employees, and how they do their job, which is your structure. So, obviously, your HR management affects your design also. They relate to each other. So, we'll look at some of these concepts in a bit more detail. We'll start with the organizational environment. The issue here is the turbulence or dynamism of the environment. How fast-paced is your organizational environment? So, if your external environment is fast changing, like if you're in the IT sector, where every day there's a new app, new technology, then you need a structure that is more adaptable, easy to change, not rigid, right? You need job roles that are broad and flexible. So today you can be programming, in this way. Tomorrow you can be programming in the other way. So your external environment will affect the type of structure. But if it's very predictable, like maybe you're in the health sector, right? Then we have very more stable, rigid structures. You're a neurosurgeon, you're a heart surgeon, you're a brain surgeon, and that's it. And these are the nurses, these are the medical attendants, and so on. These are the cleaners. It's not easily changed. You know. So we've talked about the external environment, especially affecting the internal in terms of structure. Next thing we'll look at now is strategy. From the diagram, we go to strategy. So different strategies require the use of different structures. So if, for instance, your strategy is to be the lowest cost producer in your industry, you want to be the cheapest cost producer, then you will have quite a formal structure, and you may have, for instance, what we call a core and periphery structure. You may have a core set of workers, and then the ones at the periphery may be casual workers, or maybe like 0 hours contract. Are you familiar with what we call 0 hour contract?
0 hour, I'm hearing it for the first time.
All right. So a permanent employee who work for me Monday to Friday throughout the year, apart from when you're on holiday. 0 hours contract means I'll call you up and say, I've got work tomorrow. Can you do 3 hours? And
Okay.
then for the next one week, I may not call you up. There's no guaranteed number of hours. So that's why we call it 0 hours contract. I call you only when I need you and I pay you per hour.
Right.
Right? So if I'm a low cost strategy, if my strategy is to be low cost, then I may have a structure where we have a difference between core full-time permanent workers who will be few as few as possible, and then as many flex workers or 0 hours contractors possible to flex for demand. So whenever we have increase in demand, I use them. When I don't have them, I don't have to pay them, and I don't have to pay their pension and benefits and so on. Right? So that's just an example of how your strategy can affect your structure. If it's low cost, that's the kind of structure you may tend towards having. If you have a differentiation structure, let's say your strategy, is differentiation. That is, you want to be different from your competitors, for instance, based on high quality products. For innovation, then you may have a more flexible structure for that supports innovation, more project based, a lot of research and development teams within the structure, and so on. Um, Another way in which strategy may affect your structure is what we call integration, vertical or horizontal integration, right? So this is where you want to do mergers and acquisitions of your strategy. You want to, for instance, buy up your suppliers, right, or your distributors. So rather than Coca-Cola having to pay a trucking company to truck all their products to supermarket, they can decide to do vertical integration and buy the next chain in the supply chain, which is the logistics or trucking company, and own it themselves so that they will have cheaper um, cost of distribution because it's
Right.
now they own and they don't have to pay high cost to people who will be making profit of it. So in that case, your structure will change. You will now need to include a distribution department within the Coca-Cola structure because you bought up a new company and integrated it into your structure. The same thing if Coca-Cola tomorrow says they want to diversify and there are no more, they want to, for instance, start selling water in addition to their Coke and Fanta and Sprite. They want to sell bottled water. Then they may now have a structure where you have product line structures, line structure departments that deal in fizzy drinks, sugar drinks, and so on. Another one that does water, and you have to create the structure to implement your strategy. So these are examples of how your strategy may affect your organizational structure. So going back to the diagram, you see we've done the two on the left. We've looked at the environment. We've looked at the strategy. So now we need to look at, I think technology should be the next one. Yeah. So here we are looking at the way you use your technology, such as equipment, machinery, and in some cases knowledge-based technology, software within the organization, right? And remember, sometimes this is used to replace employees. Sometimes this is used in conjunction with employees. And employees have to operate this machinery or this technology or repair them or monitor them or manage them or something like that, right? So um, the more complex the technology you use, sometimes the more complex it is to manage that organization. Um, so sometimes people think technology simplifies. Yes, it does, but at the same time, it creates its own complexity, especially in terms of getting different bits of technology to interface or talk to each other. So if you have a system, for instance, that has customer data and doesn't talk to your finance system, two pieces of technology don't talk to each other, that has created a new set of complexity because if there's human beings doing the spreadsheets on the finance side and human beings doing the data, customer data, then they can easily talk to themselves and share information and do whatever they need to do with each other. So yes, technology does simplify, we agree, but sometimes it does make things more complex. So in terms of technology, some of the key things we look at there are task variety and task analyzability. So variety is uh, the different tasks the piece of technology can perform. How many problems can it solve for you? How many jobs can it do for you? How many tasks can it do for you? Task analyzability, the availability of program solutions to manage solve problems. So this is your ability to basically to have technology that can be programmed and that can analyze data for you, right? Um, so it doesn't go straight into doing the job, performing a task. It may first of all need to analyze a bit of data and can be reprogrammed and so on. So this is just to give you a feel for the different types of technology we use. But another classification some people very popular is hardware and software. They are both technologies, right? Hardware is something you can touch, that will do a job. Software is something you can program that can analyze information for you, especially through computer chips and so on, microchips, and you can use for jobs. So both of them obviously will determine structure. So where you're using hardware, you often need to create a structure that can operate that piece of machine, repair the piece of machine, service it, fuel it, and so on, take care of it. And where more data analysis, then you have a structure that has those knowledge workers that can use the output, that can either program the input or use the output from the computer, from the piece of technology. So you have your department in your organizational structure that can do whatever is needed, whether that be machine floor with a robot or people simply sitting with their computers in an IT department or any other department. Obviously, your HR determines your organizational structure. So this is looking at the this circle here on the right is on technology known as HR. So the structure traditionally really is a map of the different job roles and who sits in those job roles and how they relate with each other. So we are talking already about the workers. So the number of workers you have determines your structure. Is it a big structure, big sized organization, small sized organization, medium sized organization? The number of workers determines your structure. The type of jobs they do will determine your structure. So if you are a manufacturing company, you have an operations department, production department, right? If you are what's it called? If you are a research company, maybe like pharmaceutical company, you need to research, then you have an R&D department, right? But it's unlikely that if you are a cleaning company or security company, you have an R&D department. You probably don't do research and development. So the nature of the job and the number of workers will determine the structure. And then the skill level of your workers also will determine how they will report to each other, who reports to who, and whether they can be more autonomous or whether they need strong levels of hierarchy and management and control. So for instance, professional workers, your doctors and so on, chartered accountants, because of the norms of that profession and so on and so forth, have a hierarchy that is already kind of like influencing organizational structure, because we know that doctors will have to operate with a structure where normally you have your doctor, your senior registrar, your consultant, because that's the way they are trained and that's the career development part for them, and they're all taking exams to progress like that. The same thing with the accountant. You need a chartered accountant by law to sign off some of your accounts, right? And therefore that chartered accountant cannot be on the same level as a normal accountant who is not chartered, right? So like that, it will affect your structure. So we basically say you need to look at these issues: your environment, your strategy, your technology, and your HR, your workforce, in designing your organizational structure. I think we're not going to go through all these slides, these just repeat themselves, but we now need to come to the idea of job design. So, after you determine the overall structure, which is what we've kind of been talking about for some time now, you need to start looking at specific jobs. You need to start looking at designing specific jobs. And there are some issues with designing the specific jobs to make them more effective and to use your workforce as effectively as possible. So one is, you may need a situation, based on your analysis, some of the jobs may need simplification, right? If they are too complex, they are too unwieldy, they are too difficult to do by one person or a team of workers, you may need to simplify the job and split the job into 2 or 3 jobs, right? So what used to be done by one person, you may need to simplify and split into 2 or 3 jobs. But you have to be careful, because too much simplification can lead to creating boring jobs. Jobs that are so boring and so basic that the employees become disengaged. And if they are disengaged, they are more likely to make mistakes because they're not paying attention, they're bored. So that is something you need to find a balance. But one thing in job design, at the job level, organizational structure at the job level, is you may need to analyze to see if you need to simplify jobs. Another thing is what we call job enlargement. So this is the opposite of job simplification, where you find that the jobs are too basic, too boring, people are not paying enough attention, or you have a high-skilled workforce or more skilled workforce that can actually cope with more complex jobs than they are doing now. So there's no need having someone with a PhD level doing undergraduate level work. You can enlarge that job, adding more tasks to it, even merge 2 jobs together for the person to do, because they are capable of delivering it. So depending again on your workforce, like we said, your HR, if you have high skilled workers, if you affect your job design, this is an example. You may need to merge jobs, enlarge jobs, adding more tasks. A similar thing but slightly different is the concept of job enrichment. So here we are not adding more tasks, but we are giving more decision-making authority, more responsibility to the worker for the set of tasks they already do. So where before they will do the job, but they have to seek approval before they start or at the finish or at certain stages of the job, or they have to seek decision to know if there's an option on do we do this or do we do this, they have to go and get approval from the manager. Now you are telling them they can do this task, they can make those decisions themselves. Right? And we find that this increases motivation and employee engagement, because workers tend to be more committed and engaged where they have more or have richer jobs, that is more autonomy, more responsibility, more decision-making power in their jobs. Right? So sometimes this is an important thing to improve employee engagement using changes to your structure. Another thing it does is it's also an opportunity for training and development. So sometimes you don't need to spend money to send somebody on a course. Sometimes you can increase their skill level simply by either enlarging their job or enriching their job, and they learn on the job. A cheaper way of training. So examples of ways you can enrich jobs. One, you can empower workers to experiment to find new or better ways of doing the job. So job enrichment is, in this case, say, okay, we've been doing this by following 4 steps. You do A, then you do B, you do C, you do D. But now you are given the freedom, find a better way, find a faster way, find a more efficient way of doing it. And it's free to use that method, right? So you may go from A to C back to B, if that's the method you want, or you may create a new method, HJK, and you've done the job. But the person is challenged to think and be creative about how they do their job, and you see that they become more engaged and more productive. Second way of doing job enrichment is encouraging workers to develop new skills, which we've talked about. It's a form of training, giving them more responsibility or added decision-making authority. They now have to learn managerial skills and decision-making skills and so on in doing a bigger job, basically. A third way they can get job enrichment is allowing workers to decide how to do the work. So this is basically freedom, so that they are not closely monitored or controlled, and they can make changes to the job methodology they want. And the fourth one is allowing workers to monitor and measure their own performance. So this is where you now allow the workers to set their targets rather than imposing the performance target on themselves at the beginning. They can set the target. Okay, for this job, I believe I can increase sales by 20%, and they set the target by themselves, right? And at the end, they can also review their work and measure their performance. Okay, looking back for the past 6 months, we've done X, Y, Z, and this is how I think we can improve, right? And these are just ways of enriching the job by creating more responsibility and decision-making authority for the job holder, rather than being managed through those processes. So we'll come to the Hackman and Oldham model. This is a model by, just highlight their names there. The job characteristics model, some people call it 5 characteristics model by Hackman and Oldham. And what this model is talking about is basically, again, enriching the job or enhancing the employee's motivation by redesigning the job, right? Which, like we said, the job is a key part of an organizational structure, the building block of the organizational structures. So we look at some job characteristics. There are 5 on the left-hand side. 1 is skill variety, 2 is task identity, 3 is task significance, 4 is autonomy, and 5 is feedback. These are the 5 things you can change in a job to enrich the job, basically, right? You can redesign the job in such a way that a higher level of skills or new skills will be needed to accomplish the tasks within the job. You can change the task identity, that is the ability, right? So they are on the next slide, actually. The ability of the worker to do a job from beginning to end, or to identify with a completed product. So where they are only screwing one nut into a wheel, right? There's low task identity. But where they have to create the whole wheel and put that wheel on a car and ensure the car has 4 wheels before it leaves their production process, then there's a higher task identity, because they are doing the job from beginning to end, and they can see the tangible product at the end of the day. They can identify with it, so they are more motivated than if from morning to night they just have to tighten one knot, and then somebody else does the next knot, and then somebody else does, that becomes boring. Task significance. So this is where you can make changes to the job in terms of task significance that make the employee feel that their task is meaningful to the organization, and actually, what Oldham and Hackman say, meaningful to society. So where somebody asks you, maybe you meet a friend at the weekend for the first time, they say, "Oh, what do you do?" Right? And you say, "Oh, I save lives. I'm a doctor. I improve people's health." Right? Because they have high task significance. They can point to a positive contribution they're making to society, or at least to the organization. I'm in charge of all the accounts of my company. I'm the chief accountant. My company cannot make a profit or loss without my accounting skills. And we find these workers are more engaged, more productive, because there's high task significance. But where the person cannot answer clearly how they feel their job is important, they say, "Oh, every day I enter data on a spreadsheet. I don't even know what the end product is. I can't see any customer that is impacted. I don't really know how it gets lost within the organization. Don't see what positive contribution my job does to society." Then there's low task significance, and more likely lower engagement, lower productivity. So autonomy, the freedom to schedule tasks, carry them out. If you improve that, again, you're enriching the job. And then feedback, the information the worker gets from doing the job. So, for instance, workers who get direct feedback from customers tend to be more engaged. Where you do a job and at the end of the day, the customer says, "Oh, thank you, you really, really helped me. Oh, this product I just bought from you made my day. It's the birthday present for my daughter, and she's going to be so happy." You see the employee at the end of the day, they've really struggled to get that product out, but they feel that job satisfaction because they can see the customer and they've got the direct feedback and they know this has brightened somebody's life. But where the employee doesn't have the opportunity to get feedback on their job, one form or the other, not necessarily from the customer, but from other sources also, then they are likely to be less motivated and less engaged. So sometimes the feedback is the company results. You can see quite clearly that your job had a significant effect on your company making a profit that year. You can say, well, out of the profit, this is the chunk I can actually even say me or my department contributed towards. Then you have higher motivation levels. So that's the on the left hand side, the 5 key job characteristics that you can improve upon. And this leads to what we call the psychological states in the middle, 3 psychological states. We get more, employees feeling their work is more meaningful. You get employees experiencing more responsibility, feel they're more responsible for the outcome of the jobs, and you get knowledge of the work, knowledge of the results of the output increasing, right? So these 3 things, when you feel your work is meaningful, when you feel you have responsibility for the outcomes, and when you feel you know the job and you know the results of the outcome of your job, you get feedback, will lead to, like we said, higher motivation, higher job satisfaction, higher performance. So this is one clear way we can see the relationship between organizational structure and HR outcomes. The way you do job design will lead to employee performance. Another issue when it comes to organizational structure is how you integrate, how you link different parts of the organization. And there are different methods there. We're running out of time, so I'll be very quick here. But basically, one is liaison roles, where you have, for instance, the manager of your department talking to the manager of the next department. Okay, are in charge of liaison. So everybody else in the department waits for information to be cascaded down from my manager after I have talked to the other department, and we get whatever information we need from the other department. Or we can get, so for instance, task force. This is people from, like, for instance, 4 different departments working together for a short period of time to deliver a project or a report, right? And then it's slightly similar, it's cross-functional team. So now, instead of us staying in our different departments and working together, we identify more as a team and we work together as a team. Although originally we came from different places with different skills, but now we are one team, we are responsible for each other, rather than each department contributing something, to a task force. Or sometimes you have an integrating role. Sometimes you have to employ people whose job is just to make sure one part of the organization structure talks to another part of the structure, passes information, and so on. So that's the organizational structure, how to integrate different parts of the structure. So now we come to organizational culture. So these are the shared set of beliefs, expectations, values, and norms, how they influence members of an organization, how these members relate to one another, cooperate with each other to achieve organizational goals. So kind of like a definition of organizational culture. It's more the mental maps, mental attitudes, and behavior of employees as a result of some shared culture, some shared belief systems. So this is the way we do things in IBM, or this is the way we do things in Google. This is the way we expect employees of Google to be. That becomes Google's culture. Obviously, organizational culture comes from the ethics and values of the organization, the employment relationship, the member characteristics, And structure, we've already talked about how structure can influence culture. These are different sources of organizational culture. Um, Members who are for instance, when we talk about members, if members tend to be from the same area or quite similar, then they would tend to think alike and share the same behavior patterns and therefore the same culture. Whereas members are more diverse, then culture may not be that strong in terms of members' influence on the culture. Organizational ethics is more the beliefs, values, ethical procedures, policies, beliefs of the organization. This will affect the culture. So that's why you have some organizations have very toxic or fraudulent or corrupt cultures. It's the way we do things here, bribery, corruption, whatever is accepted, sexual harassment is acceptable, or they have more ethical cultures. Right? So you find that from different organizations. Then the employment relationships. So the leadership style, our leaders consulting employees, the employees have a voice, how attached, uh, how loyal are employees to the organization, how loyal is the organization to employees, and so on. This will determine aspects of the organizational culture. And then structure, we already talked about that. If it's a place, it's a structure of hierarchy or autonomy, command and control culture will develop where you have a lot of hierarchy or bureaucracy can develop from your structure. Or it can be more flexible, more decentralized structure where people take decisions at lower levels. And then that will also affect your culture. You have a more nimble, adaptable, flexible culture, innovative culture. So we talked about that. And then we say cultures can be strong or weak, or innate or adaptive. So this is where the culture is adaptable to change, more adaptive culture. Uh, Innate cultures is cultures that really don't inspire or motivate employees, um, kind of like a stagnant culture. Weak culture is not really identifiable. What are the unique cultural characteristics of this company? Strong culture, culture where it's very clear what it means to work for this company. You know, this is the HP, this is the Google, this is the Coca-Cola, and stronger culture. So there's a bit here about HR policies and procedures. You can read up themselves, but this I think is a more important slide. This gives you examples of specific HR policies. So when we say you need to write HR policies, you will need to pick some of these as examples, research on them, and say, well, this is my organizational policy on this issue, right? So, for instance, age and employment. You have a mandatory age where workers need to retire if they're 60 or 65, or you take a view that you value older workers and people have the freedom to decide when they want to retire. For instance, that can be your age and employment policy, whether you discriminate based on old age or not. The same for youth. The same thing with HIV and AIDS. You have a policy that prevents discrimination for workers who may have HIV and AIDS, so on. Bullying and harassment. You have a zero tolerance policy for bullying and harassment in the workplace. And what is the punishment? What are the consequences if you are found to have bullied or harassed an employee, fellow employee, or someone you manage? So these are just examples of policies.
Right.
Social media policy is very common now. Do you allow employees to use their Facebook and Twitter and all while at work, during work hours, while at their desk? Do you allow them to log into their private social media accounts and work side by side checking their social media or not? Do you allow employees on their social media page to post stuff about the company or not? You know, the official Facebook page or Instagram page of the company, do you allow any employee to post there, or is it just the social media marketing person that can post? So all of this will be covered in your social media policy. If you are recruiting somebody, will you check their social media profile as part of the recruitment process? See if they are the kind of person you want to employ, or will you just stick to information employee voluntarily provides to you as an interview or on a CV? Or will you investigate and probe into their private life, social media, policy has to cover this? So any questions so far?
Well, it's been very clear so far.
All right, good. So procedures are more like grievance and disciplinary procedures, things that have a step-by-step process you need to follow to get to an achieved goal. So those are all called HR procedures. So things like if you are initiating a complaint against the company, that's a grievance, or if the company is initiating a complaint against an employer, they need to investigate and then come to a decision. That's a disciplinary process, and you can have a procedure. So very quickly, we look at the monitoring effectiveness of human resource management. There's a lot of slides here, but I'm just going to point at just a few key things. The point here is you need to set targets or goals for your HR department or your HR performance, and then you need to monitor and see how effective have we been in meeting these targets as the HR department or in performing HR in this organization. So what are your KPIs, your key performance indicators for the organization in terms of HR? What are your competency requirements? What competencies do you expect your workforce to have, skills and competencies, and you can profile them out and say, well, these are competency goals, if you like, and we expect people to have leadership up to this level of leadership or teamwork competency or leadership competency or project management competency and so on, right? So these are the kind of targets or goals you can set in terms of from a HR perspective for the organization, right? And we'll now go to SMART goals. I don't know if you've heard SMART goals, but you try to make your goals when you set them to be specific, or sometimes some people call it stretching, challenging goals, things that are not quite easy to achieve, but at the same time, they are not too unrealistic. They have to be specific, clear, and measurable things you can measure, so we know when they be hit or they not be hit, aligned to your organization strategy or agreed upon. Realistic, like we said, if you set a goal for me to bring you £1 million sales in 1 week as a new employee, that may be an unrealistic target. So there's no point. I will not even be motivated to try because it's still realistic. But if you say within 1 year I should have brought in £10,000 of sales, then that's unrealistic. I can actually do my best to try and meet it, and you can see me making that effort and to be helping the company improve its performance, right? And it's time bound, so I can say at the end of 1 year or 6 months is what I expect to see. So the same thing for every goal concerning your workforce or HR. It would be good to start thinking of them in terms of are they smart in the acronym. So the key performance indicators for HR here will for the wider company are things like sales, output, productivity, cost per unit, and so on and so forth, where number of customer complaints or level of percentage of customer satisfaction. These are for the overall organization. For HR, we'll be looking at things like level of employee engagement, or percentage of employee engagement, employees are highly engaged. We'll be looking at turnover. We have high or low turnover. We'll be looking at labor productivity, how many workers, what each the average worker produces. So those are the kind of HR metrics we look at. We look at the cost of HR processes, like cost of recruitment, cost of training. Those are also important things. Then we're looking at the impact of the recruitment. So instance, quality of recruits, candidates we got, quality of training, right? Transferability of training to the workplace. People feel they've been able to apply what they've learned. So those are the kind of HR metrics we can think about. And metrics can be qualitative, where you just describe in words what you want to see, or quantitative, where we say we want to move employee engagement from 30% to 70% in the next 1 year. So that's the kind of thing you need to think about from a HR perspective. And then we align the HR goals, obviously, to organizational strategy. So this goes back to our point. If you are a low-cost strategy, innovation strategy, diversification, international expansion, whatever your organization strategy or HR needs to be aligned to achieve. Right, so that's what we talk about: corporate goals going down to functional goals, which will include your HR goals, and then you can break that into sub-department, teams, and individual goals. So you can read up all the slides for yourself, but I think we've covered the key things for learning outcome. So any questions?
Well, it's been self-explanatory so far.
Okay. All right, so we'll take a short break and then we'll come back by 5. We'll have a short session where we'll talk about the assignment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.